Yeah. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the NPTEL MOOCs live session 2 for this particular course, Ecology and Society. Uh, I welcome you all, and then you can keep posting about your queries in the chat box. And meanwhile, what I do is try to briefly discuss what we have covered and did in the last 4 weeks. So we have dwell upon the a few, important theme, beginning with the conceptions of nature or contested domains and boundaries of culture. So, as we had discussed that nature, right, just since time immemorial, was one of the central concerns within the disciplines of anthropology and also in the sub disciplines like folk science and cultural ecology, pertaining to the study of myths and rituals, and also which are linked to the environment and subsistent techniques. Now, in recent years, the issues of ecology, that is in the broadest sense of term, has also tries to look into the relegated to the margin of anthropological discussion. So what we have done in this particular, theme is also to look at the symbolic ecology and social practice, because many anthropologists tries to look into the debates of the nature culture dichotomy, which was inadequate or misleading tool to account for the ways in which the people they studied were talking about and interacting with their physical environment. So the very notions of symbolic within the discipline of anthropology has devoted its attention to uh, look into the uh, logic of the native or the indigenous cosmologies, which do not appear to classify their components in conformity with the rules of the domain specificity. Now, if you look at the works of people like Durkheim and then various others, they argue that the notions or the idea of the supernatural order is necessarily derived from the idea of a natural order or things, and the former being a residual category. Now, this concept of nature, uh, which is again, discussed about by another anthropologist, Levi Strauss, who is a structuralist, tries to downplay the dualism of the nature-culture oppositions, particularly in his work, Structuralism and Ecology, wherein he advocates remarkably uh, the naturalistic conceptions of the working of the mind as a filtering device, decoding sets of contrast, which was already present in nature. So there's also, discussions on the totemic systems of, the way in which non-humans are treated as science. So next we move on to, the theme on the contested domains and boundaries of culture. Here we try to look into the human evolutionary theory, which is currently one of the most important areas of research within the discipline of ecological anthropology. So by employing these notions of the oppositions of continuity and discontinuity on the one hand, and on the other of dominations and protection, scholars like Pelson distinguish between the three kinds of human environmental relations, that is, namely Orientalism, paternalism, and communalism. And in the case of both environmental orientalism and paternalism, humans are perceived to be, uh, masters of nature, and the former exploit the late and then the later protects. So one can actually see that the nature of how for instance, among the foraging communities or those who practice foraging, the foraging behavior of human hunter gatherers, just like that of their the non-human counterparts, can be understood in the specific environmental context, where usually the decision rules or cognitive uh, that have been shaped up by the notions of Darwinian process of variations under natural selection. So we also, come across a theory called the optimal foraging theory, which consists of the formal models which predict how under the given external conditions, how a forager should behave by overriding different kinds of obstacles confronting his environment. Now the question also which arises, that is the human or hunter-gatherer than a version of the economic man or a species of optimal forager. Now, the rationality of this optimal forager is installed at the very heart of nature, while the specifically human domain of society and culture is seen as uh, a source of external normative bias that may cause behavior to deviate from the optimal. So human normally is being confronted in his environment with a choice that is, processed or being shaped by culture. And you might have come across while listening to lectures on the sub theme on culture and choice, where I discuss about the hunter gatherers or foragers, which in which they live in environments characterized by diverse and heterogeneously distributed resources. So the forager can, in a sense, choose combinations which more or less effectively and efficiently procure subsistence. So the forager's choices make up a strategy of adjustment to the ecological conditions and adaptive pattern resulting from evolutionary processes and the constraints of situation, time, and uh, chance. So therefore, we could see that hunters are normally, faced with choices, and that the choices they make add up to a pattern, and that these particular pattern changes in response to alterations in the parameters of hunting brought about, for example, by the introductions of new technologies. And we have discussed, and then the case, the examples of the Cree hunters, where the older hunters strongly committed the traditional ideal of spreading their effort across the range of species. And in this process, we have also, tried to look into the, concepts like enculturations and skillment, where the transmissions of these cultural informations must be distinguished from the experience of its applications in particular settings of use. So therefore, we could see a contrast between two forms of learning, that is the social and the individuals. So the social learning, that is the novice tries to absorb the underlying rules and principles of hunting from the already knowledgeable members of the community. And whereas in individual learning, he puts them to use in the course of his activities in the environment. So therefore, we could see that the process of culture transmission, which is a simple process of copying in which a people's inventory of rules and representations, which is downloaded into the passively receptive mind of the novice. So we could see two important, practices here, that is observation and imitation. That is where the individual, uh, observe actively to attend to the movement of others, and then also to imitates to align that particular attentions. Now we have also, look into, the different paradigms in human environmental relations, specifically, the Orientalism, paternalism, and communalism. Now we have also made the distinctions between nature and society, and on the different approaches. So here we discuss the three paradigms, namely, which I have already spelled out. So the paradigm of this communalism differs from both Orientalism and paternalism because it rejects the radical separations of nature and society, object and subject, emphasizing on the notion of dialogue. Whereas the ethical approaches to environment and human environmental relations are highly interconnected. Now, in environmental Orientalism and paternalism, there is a contrast between the dominant and protection with respect to the environment, and environmental Orientalism suggests the negative reciprocity in human environmental relations, whereas paternalism implies a balanced reciprocity, presupposing human responsibility. In both the case, humans are perceived to be the masters of the nature. So the third paradigm, that is communalism, emerged by rejecting the radical separations of nature and society, object and subject, and the modernist assumptions of othering, certainty and monologue, thereby adding the dimensions of continuity and discontinuity. So this paradigm, in a way, suggests that there's a generalized reciprocity in human environmental relations, invoking the notions of contingency and uh, dynamic. So we have also, dwell upon the theme of nature, culture, magic, and science by trying to look into the relationship between people and their environment, particularly the often presumed universal conceptual dualism of nature and culture. So this nature-culture dualism forms part of the Western ethno-epistemology, and derives from a non-universal ontological basis. So these concepts, such as magic and science, are investigated with particular reference to their dualist usage in anthropological discourse and to wider philosophical debates. So we have also terms like ethnoecology, which has to do with the study of the indigenous knowledge of natural resources and their exploitation, and also the prefix ethno indicates that the specific field of knowledge is that of observe rather than of the observer. So therefore, Western discipline of ecology, as defined by one of its pioneers as the study of the Earth's life support system, which can be seen in the works of Odund, whereas ethnoecology remains tied to notions about the natural environment. So therefore, the studies of indigenous ecological often emphasize that taxonomic categories and criteria for classifications do not correspond to that of the Western science, and that the indigenous perceptions of ecological linkages are not consistent with the Western, which postulates on causality. So thus these taxonomic categories or chains of implications are the causal linkages, which are perceived locally, and which of course are maybe severely misrepresented by the anthropological observer. So we have also, looked into the relationship between religion, nature, and environment by picking up the work of Roy Rappaport, who again is an ecological anthropologist, particularly from his book Rituals and Religion in the Making of Humanity, which could be construed as in some degree religious as well as about religion, which insists that religion can and must be reconciled with science. Now, Roy Rappaport gives a very rigorous and explicit attention to ritual because he finds in it the groups where religion is met. And Rappaport believes that one possible answer to the world's crisis would be a religion which are founded on a postmodern science, grounded in ecology rather than astronomy, so that human society might be conceived of as being inside rather than outside life on this planet. So he talked about, the process of adaptations, the use of symbols, the ritual forms, and then also rituals and ceremonies. And he also further, tries to look at ritual as a mode of communication and ritual regulations and environmental relations by basing on explicitly trying to give an examples of the Sembega community. So we have also moved on to, finally look into the various religions, which perhaps can provide an alternative in an age of environmental crisis. That how has religion shaped our understanding of and our conduct towards nature, and how has environmental crisis challenged and transformed modern theology and spiritual practice. So we begin by looking at, tracing the medieval period, their view of man and nature, how man's relations to the soil has profoundly changed with the coming of science and technology. And one of the pertinent questions which we delve upon is that what people do about their ecology depends on what they think about themselves in relation to things around them, that is their surroundings. So we also begin our, basic background by looking at the works of Lin White Jr. in his The Historical Roots of Ecological Crisis, where he argued that the victory of Christianity over paganism was the greatest psychic revolution in the history of our culture. So what did religions like Christianity tell people about their relations with the environment? And these are some of the central argument or the questions which talked about. So we have also taken up few religions like Buddhism and Hinduism, where the notions of biodiversity conservation ethics are explicitly seen in the text of Buddhism. So for instance, we have come across that in Buddhism, it views humanity as an integral part of nature, so that when nature is defiled, people ultimately suffer. So in other words, we can say that when we abuse nature, we abuse ourselves. So therefore, there is a chain of action and reactions. What we do, we in a way receive back. So therefore, there is a negative consequences arises when cultures alienate themselves from nature, and when people feel separate from form and become aggressive towards the natural systems. So therefore, Buddhism actually uh, uh, holds a respect for and gratitude towards nature, and nature actually is the mother of that gift. So therefore, one can also see that in the earliest text, particularly Sanskrit text that is beginning from the Vedas and Upanishads, actually teach the non-dualism of supreme power that existed before the creations. Now, we have also, talked about the examples of, the Bishnoi community, how they have set an example of, successful biodiversity conservations, which are based on their religious thinking and mindset, and where they have imbibed such notions of understanding on that issue. Now, Finally, we have also, look into, the ecological crisis, which was, as clarion called from none other than Pope John Paul II, where he talked about the ecological crisis as a common responsibility by talking about the portions from the biblical text. And he also mentions about where the current ecological crisis is a moral crisis or a moral issue. So which means we need to join hands in terms of referring to this. So I look forward to interacting you all with Sunt, and some of your concerns regarding, which books or websites to follow, or uploading the notes of these courses and all. If you could look into that, because our technical team has already, uploaded, the relevant lecture slides, the PPTs for all the, lectures so far. And I would strongly suggest that if you, uh, listen carefully the lecture notes at the same time, enhance by referring those lecture slides or PPTs. It will be enough for this particular course to score well or whatever you want to, because it will be purely based on multiple choice questions, and therefore all questions are actually, being framed in such a way that it is being covered in the lecture slides. So therefore, if you, sincerely look into the idea of, what we have discussed in the lectures as well as the lecture slides, it's more than enough. And thank you all. And I earnestly request you all to listen to lectures over again. If you have any doubt or questions, you please let me know. Thank you, and I once again thank you all for offering this course, and I look after to interact with you all again. Thank you.